Now that Oscar season is over, I kind of want to talk about a movie that has set itself up as a possible contender at next year's Oscars. Let's talk about Dune Part 2. Dune Part 2 is the follow-up to 2021's Dune, which was directed by Denis Villeneuve, and it follows the continuing adventures of Paul Atreides on the planet of Arrakis. Now, spoilers for Part 1. In Part 1, Paul's family, the Atreides family, is given stewardship of the planet of Arrakis by the Emperor Shaddam IV, and the Harkonnens, who used to be the stewards of the planet, are, well, pissed off, and so they decide, in a sort of joint attack, it's kind of a political thing, to attack the Atreides with the troops of the Emperor Shaddam IV and destroy House Atreides. Now, Paul and his mother survive, and they end up joining the locals of the planet known as the Fremen. Dune Part 2 picks up pretty much immediately after where Dune Part 1 leaves off, which sees Paul and his mother try to join the Fremen. And it starts off with an incredible action sequence. And that action sequence really sets up the visual splendor that we're going to witness in this movie, and I'll talk about that later. Now, the main theme or through line for this movie sees Paul struggling with, funnily enough, his glorious purpose, because the Bene Gesserit, which are a group of non-space witches, have sort of indoctrinated the people of the Fremen with this prophecy of Lisan al-Ghaib, who will come to liberate them, and they're trying to put forward, especially Paul's mother is trying to put forward Paul as this Lisan al-Ghaib, as this prophet, as this Messiah, and Paul has to deal with the struggle of that responsibility. Paul really doesn't want to be that. In fact, he just wants to be part of the Fremen, part of the family, and help them gain liberation, but not as a Messiah. And Paul's struggle with this purpose and what his mother is trying to set him up for is what drives the plot of the film forward, but what carries the emotional weight of the film is Paul's relationship with a Fremen woman by the name of Chani, played by Zendaya. Now, Paul and Chani fall in love over the course of this movie, and a lot of the first half of this movie is focused on their relationship, on Paul trying to gain the approval of the Fremen, but also how his relationship with Chani develops as she helps him do that. And Chani serves to ground Paul. She serves to keep him grounded instead of getting big-headed and believing that he is this great Messiah who will save the Fremen people. Another big theme in this movie is blind belief in religion and in prophecy, because there are people of the Fremen who blindly believe the propaganda of the Bene Gesserit and of Paul's mother that there will come a Messiah, the Lisan al-Ghaib, to save them, and they believe that it is Paul. And even though he does things that aren't that uncommon and aren't that hard to know, especially with the amount of information Paul had access to before this, they still see him as this great prophet, and they basically fulfill the prophecy for him, even though he might not actually be the prophesized Messiah. And this is most apparent in the character of Stilgar, who helps rescue Paul and his mother and bring them into Fremen society. And he seems to be the loudest mouthpiece that promotes Paul as the Lisan al-Ghaib. Now, as for the acting, Timothée Chalamet is great in this movie, but finally we get to see Zendaya, who's been used in a lot of the marketing for Dune Part 1 and showed up for all of 7 minutes. Now, while those two were great in this movie, I would reserve props for Javier Bardem, who played Stilgar, because not only did he also serve as the heart of these conservative religious Fremen, he was also kind of hilarious, and not in a forced way. It's just that his extremism and his over-believing in Paul lends itself to comedy. Another actor I want to mention is Austin Butler as Feyd-Rautha the Harkonnen, because damn, was he good. He really delivers that amount of the unhinged menace that is supposed to be part of this character. And there are moments where you truly do not know what is going to happen when he steps into a room. Also, another thing I want to say is this movie is beautifully shot. It is a visual masterpiece. It is a beauty to look at, and it's shot in IMAX, and I watched it in IMAX, and damn, it's good to find a film in a while that fully uses that IMAX screen ratio. And scenes are just beautiful to look at. The scenes on Arrakis, especially, you might have seen already screenshots online about with the sandworms, and it looks amazing. Also, the scenes that were shot on the Harkonnen home planet look beautiful, and credit to Greg Fraser, because he has pulled off one of the most beautiful films of the year. And one of the great positives about this film, and what Denis Villeneuve has done with both Dune Part 1 and Dune Part 2, is bring us into a world and allow us to truly explore it. And very few filmmakers can do that. And very few movies do that for me. I mean, two of the movies that did truly allow you to breathe and live in this world for me is Lord of the Rings, which is one of the greatest movies ever made, and also Avatar, which James Cameron's Avatar, which allows you to live and breathe in the world of Pandora. And I feel like Dune Part 1 and Dune Part 2 really do that. They really bring you into Arrakis, aided by the incredible visuals, and hats off to Denis Villeneuve for doing that. Now, I have been gushing about this movie, but I did find a few negatives with Dune. And online I've seen a lot of superlatives about how Dune has saved cinema. Dune has not saved cinema. What it has done is shown what can be done with cinema, and hopefully studio execs take the correct lessons from this. But as for the flaws of this movie, I think the main flaw for me is the pacing and the sense of time, because throughout the length of this movie, I really can't tell how much time has passed, and it feels like the pacing kind of rushes how Paul gets in with the Fremen, how he becomes one of the Fremen, and we don't really see that develop, as well as his relationship with Shani. Now, given where I am, the film was kind of heavily edited to remove a few scenes, but I still feel like that relationship didn't have enough time to ruminate and develop, and how Paul earns his place amongst the Fremen really isn't expanded upon enough. I feel like this movie is 2 hours and 46 minutes long, and I feel like it could have been 3+ hours long, and I wouldn't have minded it, because it'll allow us to live in this incredible world a bit longer, while also developing these relationships that Paul is building. Now, this movie also kind of ends on a bit of a cliffhanger, because Denis Villeneuve might or might not be directing Part 3, which will adapt the book Dune Messiah. But as a duology, I feel like it is quite complete. The cliffhanger here isn't as terrible as in Dune Part 1, which just literally feels like we're halfway through a book, done. But it is a little bit of a cliffhanger, and hopefully we do get a Dune Part 3. Anyway, I give Dune a solid 8 out of 10. Have you seen Dune, either Dune Part 1 or Dune Part 2? Did you enjoy it? What would you want more from cinema, actually, going forward, especially with what Dune has done? Please let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video. Also, please check out some of these other videos that I did, and leave a like, and also consider subscribing.